The morning bell rang across Maple Ridge Elementary School, its cheerful chime echoing through hallways decorated with colorful student artwork and motivational posters. Children streamed through the main entrance, their voices creating a symphony of laughter and excitement that only second graders could produce. Backpacks bounced against small shoulders as friends reunited after the weekend, sharing stories about soccer games, birthday parties, and adventures that seemed monumental in their 7-year-old worlds. Mrs. Sarah Bennett stood at her classroom door, greeting each student with her trademark warm smile. After 15 years of teaching, she prided herself on reading children like open books. She could spot a troubled child from across the cafeteria, identify learning struggles before they became failures, and sense when something wasn't quite right in a student's life. This intuition had made her one of the most respected teachers at Maple Ridge, someone parents requested by name and administrators relied upon for difficult cases. Today, however, would test that intuition in ways she never imagined. Among the familiar faces filing into room 204 was a new student. The girl moved with careful, deliberate steps, as if navigating invisible obstacles. Her uniform, a standard white polo shirt and navy blue skirt, hung loosely on her small frame, clearly a size too large. The fabric looked worn, the collar slightly frayed, the white not quite as bright as it should have been. An oversized backpack, faded and patched in places, seemed to weigh her down despite her determined posture. But it was her eyes that caught Mrs. Bennett's attention. They held something the teacher couldn't quite identify, a wariness perhaps, or a sadness that seemed far too heavy for someone so young. The girl's dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, neat but without the colorful accessories most second-grade girls favored. No sparkly clips, no bright ribbons, nothing that spoke of childhood frivolity. "Good morning, sweetheart," Mrs. Bennett said gently, kneeling to be at eye level with the new student. "You must be Emily Parker. I'm Mrs. Bennett, and I'm so happy to have you in our class." Emily nodded, offering the briefest flicker of a smile before her expression returned to carefully controlled neutrality. She clutched the straps of her backpack with small hands that seemed to grip too tightly, knuckles almost white with tension. "Why don't you hang your backpack on hook number 17? That's your special spot. Then you can choose any seat you'd like. We're pretty flexible here." Emily followed the instructions without speaking, moving to hang her backpack among the others. Mrs. Bennett noticed how she glanced around the classroom, taking in every detail, the reading corner with its beanbags and shelves full of books, the science table with its terrarium and collection of rocks, the cluster of desks arranged in groups of 4 to encourage collaboration and friendship. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy educational stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. The other students had already settled into their seats, pulling out notebooks and pencils, chattering about their weekends. Emily approached one of the empty desks near the window, standing beside the chair as if considering it. Mrs. Bennett noticed but assumed the girl was simply getting her bearings, familiarizing herself with her new environment. First-day nerves were completely normal, after all. "All right, class," Mrs. Bennett called out, clapping her hands twice, the signal for attention. 23 pairs of eyes turned toward her, including Emily's. "Let's start our morning by welcoming our new friend, Emily Parker. Emily just moved to our neighborhood, and I know we're all going to make her feel right at home. Who wants to be Emily's buddy this week?" A dozen hands shot into the air, eager to take on the responsibility. Mrs. Bennett selected Jessica Martinez, a bubbly girl known for her kindness and ability to befriend anyone. "Thank you, Jessica. Emily, Jessica will show you where everything is, the bathroom, the cafeteria, the library. If you have any questions, She's your go-to person, okay?" Emily nodded again, still silent. "Now, everyone, let's take out our math journals. We're going to start with a quick review of addition with regrouping." The classroom filled with the sounds of rustling paper and opening desks. Mrs. Bennet moved to the whiteboard, preparing to write out the day's problems. Behind her, she heard the scraping of chairs as students sat down, ready to begin. But one sound was conspicuously absent. She turned around to find Emily still standing beside her desk, backpack at her feet, hands clasped in front of her. The other students had already settled in, pencils poised, but Emily remained upright, her posture almost military in its rigidity. "Emily, honey, you can sit down now," Mrs. Bennet said with an encouraging smile. Emily glanced at the chair, then back at Mrs. Bennet, and shook her head, a tiny movement, almost imperceptible. "Are you okay, sweetheart? Is something wrong with your chair?" Another shake of the head. Mrs. Bennet walked over, examining the chair for any obvious problems. It looked perfectly fine. No wobbles, no broken parts, nothing that would prevent a child from sitting. "This chair looks good to me. Why don't you give it a try?" Emily's jaw tightened and she stared at the floor, refusing to meet Mrs. Bennet's eyes. "I want to stand, please." It was the first time Mrs. Bennet had heard her voice, soft, polite, but carrying an undertone of desperation that seemed strange for such a simple request. "Well, we usually sit during lessons so everyone can see the board," Mrs. Bennet explained patiently. "But I suppose you can stand for now if you're more comfortable. We'll talk about it later, okay?" Relief washed over Emily's face, and she nodded gratefully. The lesson proceeded, and Mrs. Bennet tried to focus on teaching, but her attention kept drifting to the small figure standing at desk 17. Emily participated when called upon, her answers revealing a sharp mind and solid grasp of mathematics. She wasn't acting out or being disruptive. She simply refused to sit. During reading time, the pattern continued. While the other students settled into their chairs with their chapter books, Emily remained standing, holding her book up to read. When Mrs. Bennet suggested she might be more comfortable in one of the beanbags in the reading corner, Emily politely declined. "My legs are fine, Mrs. Bennet. I like standing." Lunchtime brought a new twist to the mystery. The cafeteria buzzed with the controlled chaos of 200 elementary students eating, talking, and trading snacks. Mrs. Bennet had lunch duty that day, and she positioned herself where she could observe her students while monitoring the room. Emily sat alone at the end of a table, not because other students were excluding her, but because Jessica and 2 other girls had invited her to sit with them, and Emily had chosen a spot slightly apart. Except Emily wasn't sitting. She stood at the table, her lunch tray in front of her, eating while standing. The other students at her table exchanged puzzled glances but said nothing. From across the cafeteria, Mrs. Bennet watched a lunch monitor approach Emily. "Sweetie, you need to sit down while you eat. It's a safety rule." Emily's face paled. "Please, ma'am, I can stand carefully. I won't spill anything." "Rules are rules, honey. Everyone has to sit during lunch." Mrs. Bennet started making her way across the cafeteria, weaving between tables, sensing that this confrontation needed her intervention. She arrived just as Emily's eyes began to glisten with unshed tears. "It's all right, Margaret," Mrs. Bennet said to the lunch monitor. "Emily has special permission to stand today. I'm working with her on it." Margaret looked skeptical but nodded and moved on to police other tables. Emily shot Mrs. Bennet a look of such profound gratitude that it made the teacher's heart ache. What could cause a child to be so desperate to avoid sitting that even the threat of breaking cafeteria rules couldn't convince her to comply? The afternoon brought art class, Emily's first opportunity to interact with Mrs. Chen, the beloved art teacher known for her patience and creativity. Mrs. Bennet walked her class down the hallway to the art room, A bright space filled with student paintings, sculptures in various stages of completion, and shelves stocked with supplies that inspired imagination. "Today we're going to work on self-portraits," Mrs. Chen announced cheerfully. "I want you to think about what makes you unique and special, and try to capture that in your drawing." The students pulled out chairs around the large art tables. Excited to begin, Emily approached her assigned spot but remained standing, even as Mrs. Chen distributed paper and oil pastels. "Dear, you'll need to sit to reach the table properly," Mrs. Chen said kindly, not yet aware of Emily's unusual behavior. "I can stand and lean over, ma'am," Emily responded quickly. "I can reach just fine." Mrs. Chen looked to Mrs. Bennet, who had lingered in the doorway to observe. The art teacher's expression asked the silent question, "What's going on with this child?" Mrs. Bennet gave a subtle shake of her head and a small shrug, indicating she didn't have answers yet. Mrs. Chen, to her credit, didn't push the issue. "All right then, let's see what you can create." For the next 40 minutes, Emily stood at the art table, leaning over her paper, creating a self-portrait that was remarkably skilled for a 7-year-old. She used bold strokes of color, capturing details that showed genuine artistic talent. But Mrs. Bennet noticed something troubling in the portrait. While most children drew themselves smiling, surrounded by sunshine and flowers, Emily's portrait showed a small figure standing alone. The background mostly gray and blue, with just a hint of yellow in one corner, like a sun trying to break through clouds. When the class returned to room 204 for the final hour of the day, Mrs. Bennet decided it was time to address the situation more directly. As the students worked on independent reading, she called Emily to her desk. "Emily, can we talk for a minute?" The girl approached hesitantly, her eyes darting to the chair beside Mrs. Bennet's desk. "You can stand. Sweetheart, I just want to understand what's going on. You've been standing all day, through every class, even during lunch. Can you help me understand why?" Emily stared at the floor, her small hands twisting together. "I just like standing." "I can see that, but I'm worried you're going to get very tired. Your legs must be exhausted by now." "They're okay." "Emily." Mrs. Bennet softened her voice even more, infusing it with all the warmth and compassion she possessed. "You're not in trouble, I promise. But as your teacher, I need to make sure you're comfortable and that nothing is wrong. Is there a reason, a real reason, why you don't want to sit?" The girl's lower lip trembled, and for a moment, Mrs. Bennet thought she might open up. But then Emily's expression closed off again, that careful mask of neutrality sliding back into place. "I just like standing, Mrs. Bennet. Please don't make me sit." There was something in that plea, that desperate please, that told Mrs. Bennet this went far deeper than simple preference or stubbornness. This child was hiding something, and whatever it was serious enough to make her endure an entire school day on her feet, rather than reveal it. The dismissal bell rang at 3 o'clock, and students gathered their belongings with the enthusiastic chaos that marked the end of every school day. Parents lined up outside, and buses pulled into the circular drive. Mrs. Bennet watched as Emily carefully shouldered her oversized backpack, wincing slightly as the straps settled into place. "Emily, do you ride the bus, or does someone pick you up?" "I walk, ma'am." "You walk? Where do you live?" Emily's hesitation was palpable. Not far, just a few blocks. Mrs. Bennet knew the neighborhood around Maple Ridge Elementary. Some areas were lovely suburban streets with well-maintained homes and manicured lawns. Others, particularly on the far side of the commercial district, were rougher, apartments that had seen better days, abandoned buildings, empty lots. She wondered which direction Emily would head. "I'll walk you out to make sure you get off safely," Mrs. Bennet offered. At the front entrance, they found chaos, parents calling for their children, buses loading, crossing guards directing traffic. Emily seemed to scan the crowd, looking for something or someone. Then, without any farewell, she simply started walking, her pace quick and purposeful. Mrs. Bennet watched her go, noting that Emily headed east toward the less affluent part of the district. The girl never looked back, just kept walking with that same determined stride, her too large backpack bouncing against her shoulders. That evening, Mrs. Bennet sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, unable to stop thinking about Emily Parker. She pulled out her laptop and accessed the school's student information system, looking up Emily's file. The information was sparse, a transfer from a school in the next county, no special education services, no medical alerts. The emergency contact listed only one person, Sarah Parker, mother with a cell phone number but no permanent address. Under current residence, someone had written temporary housing with no further details. Temporary housing. That could mean many things. Staying with relatives, living in a motel, a transitional shelter. Mrs. Bennet's mind raced through possibilities, each one potentially explaining Emily's behavior. But none quite fit. Why would temporary housing make a child refuse to sit? She called her colleague, Marcus Thompson, who taught 5th grade and had been at Maple Ridge for 20 years. If anyone had encountered unusual student behavior, it would be Marcus. "Hey, Sarah," Marcus answered. "What's up?" "I've got a strange situation and I'm wondering if you've ever seen anything like it. New student today, 7 years old, refused to sit all day long. Not acting out, not being defiant, just absolutely will not sit down in a chair." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Medical issue, maybe. Back problems, tailbone injury. I thought of that, but there's nothing in her file. And she doesn't move like someone in acute pain. It's more like she's afraid to sit." "Afraid? That's odd. Could it be sensory issues? Some kids with autism or sensory processing disorders have strong preferences about positions and textures." "Possibly, but again, nothing in her record suggests that. And she seems neurotypical in every other way. Good eye contact when she's not feeling defensive, appropriate social awareness, no stimming behaviors." "What does your gut tell you?" Mrs. Bennet sighed. "That this child is hiding something she doesn't want anyone to discover. But I can't figure out what it could be." "Give it a few days," Marcus advised. "Sometimes kids do strange things when they're adjusting to a new school. If it continues, you can request a conference with the parent, maybe suggest a health screening." The advice made sense, but Mrs. Bennet felt an urgency she couldn't quite explain. Years of teaching had taught her to trust her instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that Emily needed help sooner rather than later. The next morning, Emily arrived at school wearing the same oversized uniform, though it looked freshly cleaned. Mrs. Bennet greeted her warmly, hoping the girl might be more comfortable on her second day. But as morning lessons began, Emily once again stood beside her desk, refusing all invitations to sit. During math, while working through multiplication problems, Jessica Martinez raised her hand. "Mrs. Bennet, why does Emily always stand? Is she allergic to chairs or something?" A few students giggled, and Mrs. Bennet quickly intervened. "Everyone has different preferences, Jessica. Emily likes to stand, and that's perfectly fine. Let's focus on our math, please." But the damage was done. Emily's cheeks flushed red, and her eyes dropped to the floor. During recess, Mrs. Bennet noticed Emily standing alone by the fence while other children played. Jessica and her friends approached, clearly trying to include the new girl, but Emily declined their invitation to join a game of Foursquare. By Wednesday, the standing had become the subject of playground gossip. Children whispered and pointed. Some tried to be helpful, offering Emily cushions or asking if she'd hurt her bottom. Others were less kind. During recess duty, Mrs. Bennet overheard 2 boys from her class talking near the basketball court. "I bet she thinks her butt is too good for our chairs," Tyler Peterson said, bouncing a basketball. Maybe she has a really big butt and she's embarrassed, Connor Walsh added, and both boys laughed. Boys, Mrs. Bennett's voice cut through their laughter. That is unkind and inappropriate. I expect better from both of you. Apologize to Emily. The boys mumbled apologies, but the incident highlighted how Emily's behavior was affecting her social integration. By refusing to conform to basic classroom norms, she was marking herself as different, inviting exactly the kind of attention a child in a difficult situation would want to avoid. That afternoon, during silent reading time, Mrs. Bennett tried a different approach. She brought a tall stool to Emily's desk. I thought you might like this, she said quietly. It's not quite standing and not quite sitting. Maybe it would be a nice compromise. Emily looked at the stool with something like longing, then shook her head. Thank you, Mrs. Bennett, but I'm okay standing. Your legs must be so tired, sweetheart. They're fine. But they weren't fine. Mrs. Bennett had noticed Emily shifting her weight more frequently, occasionally rubbing one leg against the other, subtle signs of fatigue. Yet the child's determination remained unshakable. Thursday brought a development that escalated the situation. Principal Judith Morrison made her weekly rounds, visiting classrooms to observe and support teachers. When she entered room 204 during language arts, her experienced eye immediately zeroed in on the one student standing while all others sat. After the lesson, Principal Morrison asked to speak with Mrs. Bennett in the hallway. What's the situation with the standing child? She asked, her tone professional but concerned. Mrs. Bennett explained everything she'd observed over the past 4 days. Emily's absolute refusal to sit, the lack of medical information in her file, the sparse family details, the temporary housing notation. Principal Morrison frowned. This has been going on for 4 days, and we're no closer to understanding why. I've tried gentle questioning. I've tried offering alternatives. I've tried making her comfortable enough to open up. She just keeps saying she likes standing. We can't have students disrupting classroom norms without a documented reason, Principal Morrison said firmly. It sets a precedent. Other children will start testing boundaries, claiming they also prefer to stand or sit on the floor or work while lying down. There has to be structure. I understand that, Judith, but my instinct tells me there's something serious going on here. This isn't a child testing boundaries. This is a child who's frightened. Frightened of what? Chairs? Mrs. Bennett chose her words carefully. I think she's frightened of what we might discover if she sits. I think she's hiding something physical, and sitting would expose it or cause her pain. Principal Morrison's expression shifted from administrative concern to genuine worry. You think she's being abused? I don't know what to think. There are no obvious signs, no visible bruises on her arms or legs, no behavioral red flags like aggression or withdrawal beyond this one issue. But yes, abuse crossed my mind. Then we need to document this and possibly report it to Child Protective Services. Based on what? A child who prefers to stand? CPS is already overwhelmed. They won't investigate because a second grader won't sit down. Principal Morrison pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture Mrs. Bennett recognized as her way of processing difficult situations. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'll call the mother, request a meeting. We'll frame it as a welcome conference for a new student, nothing threatening. You'll be there, I'll be there, and we'll see if we can get some answers. If the mother is evasive or if anything seems off, we'll take the next steps. And in the meantime? In the meantime, Emily can continue standing, but we need to set a deadline. If we don't have resolution or explanation by the end of next week, we'll need to implement consequences. Detention, loss of privileges, something that communicates that following school rules isn't optional. Mrs. Bennett wanted to argue, to insist that punishing Emily was exactly the wrong approach, but she understood Principal Morrison's position. Schools operated on structure and consistency. You couldn't allow one child to flout rules without good reason, or chaos would follow. That afternoon, the phone call was made. Mrs. Bennet sat in Principal Morrison's office, listening to one side of the conversation. "Miss Parker, this is Judith Morrison, principal at Maple Ridge Elementary. Yes, Emily is doing fine academically. We'd like to schedule a brief meeting with you to discuss her adjustment to our school. Tomorrow at 3:30. That would be perfect. No, nothing to worry about. Just routine for new students. We'll see you then." Principal Morrison hung up and looked at Mrs. Bennet. She sounded nervous. Very nervous. Her voice was shaking. Could be perfectly innocent. Some parents are intimidated by calls from the principal. Maybe. Or maybe there's a reason to be nervous. Friday arrived with gray skies threatening rain. Emily appeared at the classroom door looking more tired than usual, dark circles visible under her eyes. Mrs. Bennet wondered if the child was sleeping well or sleeping at all. Throughout the morning, Emily stood through lessons as always, but her concentration seemed to waver. During a spelling test, Mrs. Bennet noticed her gripping the edge of her desk for support. At lunchtime, Emily ate less than usual, pushing food around her tray while standing at the table. Jessica, who had continued trying to befriend Emily despite the rebuffs, sat nearby with her lunch group. "Emily, we're going to play on the swings after lunch. Want to come?" Jessica offered. Emily gave a small smile. "Maybe. Thank you for asking." It was the most positive response she'd given to a social invitation all week, and Mrs. Bennet felt a small surge of hope. Perhaps Emily was beginning to feel safe enough to let down her guard. But recess shattered that hope in the most unexpected way. Mrs. Bennet was supervising the playground when she heard a commotion near the swings. A crowd of children had gathered, their voices rising in that particular pitch that signaled something was wrong. She jogged over to find Emily at the center of the group, standing rigid, her face contorted in pain. "What happened?" Mrs. Bennet pushed through the circle of students. "She tried to sit on the swing," Jessica explained, her voice worried. "And then she made this noise like she was hurt really bad, and now she won't move." Emily stood frozen beside the swing, one hand gripping the chain, her breathing rapid and shallow. Tears streamed down her face, and she bit her lower lip so hard that Mrs. Bennet worried she might draw blood. "Everyone, step back, please. Give Emily some space." Mrs. Bennet gently touched the girl's shoulder. "Sweetheart, what hurts?" Emily couldn't speak, could only shake her head, tears flowing freely now. "Did you fall? Did you twist something?" Another head shake. Mrs. Bennet noticed how Emily held herself, slightly twisted, her weight shifted to one side, one hand pressed against her lower back. The position spoke of someone trying desperately to minimize pain. "Emily, I need to help you, but I need to know what's wrong. Can you tell me what hurts?" The girl's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Everything. It all hurts. Your back, your legs, your bottom." Emily nodded at all three questions, and Mrs. Bennet's concern crystallized into alarm. This wasn't normal soreness from standing too long. This was something else entirely. "Okay, honey, I'm going to help you walk to the nurse's office. We're going to take it very slowly, all right? Can you put your arm around my shoulder?" They made their way across the playground, Emily taking tiny, careful steps, whimpering with each movement. The other students watched silently, their earlier teasing forgotten in the face of obvious suffering. Mrs. Bennet caught Jessica's eye and saw genuine distress there, the guilt of someone who had inadvertently caused pain by extending a friendly invitation. In the nurse's office, Melissa Rodriguez, the school nurse, took one look at Emily's condition and immediately cleared the room of the two students who'd been there with minor complaints. "What happened?" Melissa asked, helping Emily to stand beside the examination table. "She tried to sit on a swing and experienced severe pain," Mrs. Bennet explained. "She's been standing for 4 days straight, refusing all attempts to sit, and now we know why." Melissa's professional demeanor kicked in. "Emily, sweetheart, I'm going to need to examine you to see what's causing this pain. Is that okay?" Emily's eyes went wide with fear. "No, please, please don't. I'm fine. I just need to stand for a minute and I'll be fine." "Honey, you're clearly not fine," Melissa said gently. "You're in significant pain, and I need to find out why so we can help you." "You can't help. Nobody can help." Emily's voice broke on the last word, and she began crying harder, her whole body shaking with sobs. Mrs. Bennet knelt beside her, taking the girl's small hand in hers. "Emily, whatever is wrong, whatever you're hiding, you don't have to hide it anymore. We're here to help you, not to get you in trouble. I promise you're safe here." For a long moment, Emily looked into Mrs. Bennet's eyes, searching for something. Truth, perhaps, or trustworthiness. Whatever she found there seemed to crack the walls she'd built around herself. "It hurts so much," she whispered. "I'm trying to be brave, but it hurts all the time." "I know, sweetheart. I can see that. Will you let Nurse Rodriguez look? She's very gentle, I promise." Emily closed her eyes and gave the tiniest nod. Melissa moved with professional efficiency but maximum gentleness. "I'm going to need you to lift your shirt just a little bit so I can see your lower back. Is that okay?" Another small nod. What happened next would be seared into Mrs. Bennet's memory forever. As Emily slowly lifted the hem of her oversized polo shirt, revealing the skin beneath, both adults audibly gasped. Emily's lower back was covered in bruises, some fresh and purple, others yellowing as they healed, creating a horrible patchwork of injury. But it wasn't just bruises. There were scrapes, some still raw, and areas of skin that looked inflamed and infected. The pattern was random, not the kind of marks that would come from a belt or hand, but rather from repeated contact with something hard and uneven. "Oh, sweetheart," Melissa breathed, her professional composure cracking. "How did this happen?" Mrs. Bennet felt her own eyes filling with tears. No wonder this child had refused to sit. The pain must have been excruciating every single moment of every single day. "Emily," Mrs. Bennet said, her voice thick with emotion, "who did this to you?" The question seemed to confuse Emily. Did it? Nobody did it. It just happens. "What do you mean it just happens?" Emily's face crumpled. "From sleeping. It happens from sleeping on the floor. But Mommy says we have to be brave and not tell anyone because they might take me away. And she's trying so hard to fix everything, and I don't want anyone to know we're—" She stopped abruptly, as if realizing she'd said too much. "You're what, honey?" Mrs. Bennet prompted gently. But Emily had retreated back into silence, her lips pressed together, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. Melissa carefully lowered Emily's shirt and met Mrs. Bennet's eyes over the child's head. The nurse's expression communicated everything without words. This was serious. This required immediate action. This child was suffering. "Emily, I need to take some pictures of these injuries for your medical file," Melissa explained. "And then we're going to clean and bandage some of these scrapes. Mrs. Bennet will stay right here with you the whole time, okay?" As Melissa worked, photographing and documenting the extent of Emily's injuries, Mrs. Bennet held the girl's hand, murmuring reassurances. The full picture emerged slowly, horrifyingly. The bruises and scrapes extended from Emily's lower back down to her upper thighs, everywhere that would make contact with a surface when sitting or lying down. Some areas looked like they'd been repeatedly injured and had never had a chance to properly heal. "How long have you had these injuries?" Melissa asked, while gently cleaning a particularly nasty scrape with antiseptic. "I don't know. A while," Since we left our apartment? When did you leave your apartment? Emily thought for a moment. After Mommy lost her job, she worked at the grocery store, but they closed it down. Then we couldn't pay rent. The landlord made us leave. Mrs. Bennet felt her heart breaking. Where have you been sleeping? Emily. The girl's voice dropped to barely audible. In a building. An old building. Mommy found it. She said it was temporary just until she saves enough money for a real place. But the floor is concrete and there's broken tiles and it's cold and hard, and I try to sleep on my side, but I always end up on my back, and it hurts so much when I wake up. Oh, sweetheart. Mrs. Bennet couldn't stop the tears now. They rolled down her cheeks as she held this brave, hurting child who had endured so much without complaint. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell anyone? Because Mommy said if people found out, the government would take me away and put me in foster care, and she'd never get me back. She said we had to keep it secret, had to pretend everything was normal. She makes me shower at the gas station bathroom every morning, so I'm clean for school. She makes sure my uniform is washed. She's trying so hard, Mrs. Bennet. Please don't take me away from my Mommy. Please. The anguish in Emily's voice, the desperate love for a mother who was clearly doing her best in impossible circumstances, nearly undid Mrs. Bennet completely. This wasn't a case of abuse or neglect in the traditional sense. This was poverty, homelessness, a family system that had failed to catch a falling woman and her child before they hit bottom. Melissa finished bandaging the worst of Emily's scrapes and pulled Mrs. Bennet aside while Emily sat carefully on the edge of the examination table, her small body hunched with exhaustion and fear. We have to report this, Melissa said quietly. Mandatory reporting laws are clear. A child living in dangerous conditions, injuries from those conditions, this is exactly what the law is designed to address. I know, Mrs. Bennet said, but Emily's right to be scared. Once we report this, CPS will investigate. They might remove her from her mother's custody. Or they might help connect the family to resources, emergency housing, financial assistance, medical care. That's the whole point of the system, Sarah. Mrs. Bennet knew Melissa was right. The system existed to help children like Emily. But she also knew the system was imperfect, overwhelmed, sometimes causing more trauma than it prevented. Still, they had no choice. Emily needed help beyond what the school could provide. I'll call CPS as soon as we finish here, Melissa said, and I'm calling her mother too. That 3:30 meeting just became a lot more urgent. While Melissa made her phone calls, Mrs. Bennet sat with Emily, who seemed both relieved and terrified by her confession. The girl's eyes kept darting to the door as if expecting her mother to burst in at any moment. Am I in trouble? Emily asked in a small voice. No, honey. You're not in trouble at all. You're incredibly brave and strong, and you've been trying so hard to protect your mom. But sometimes even kids who are trying to be brave need grown-ups to help them. That's what we're going to do, help you and your mom. You promise they won't take me away? Mrs. Bennet couldn't make that promise, much as she wanted to. I promise that everyone who's about to get involved in this situation wants what's best for you. That's all I can promise, sweetheart. But I'll fight for you. I'll do everything I can to make sure you and your mom stay together and get the help you need. Sarah Parker arrived at Maple Ridge Elementary at 2:45, 15 minutes before the scheduled meeting. Mrs. Bennet saw her through the office window, a thin woman in her mid-30s wearing worn but clean clothes, her face etched with worry lines that seemed too deep for her age. She clutched a small purse and kept glancing around as if expecting security to escort her out. Principal Morrison had already briefed the CPS caseworker, Linda Chen, who'd arrived shortly after the call. The plan was for the meeting to start with just the school staff and Ms. Parker, then bring in the caseworker once the situation had been explained. The goal was to avoid immediately making Ms. Parker feel attacked or accused. But plans changed when Sarah Parker entered the office and immediately said, "Where's Emily? Is she hurt? Your nurse said there was a medical issue." Her face had gone pale, her hands trembling as she gripped her purse. This wasn't the reaction of someone hiding abuse. This was a mother terrified for her child. "Emily is fine," Principal Morrison said quickly. "She's resting in the nurse's office. Why don't we all sit down and— I want to see her. Right now, please." The desperation in her voice was so raw that Mrs. Bennet made an executive decision. "I'll take you to her." They walked down the hallway in silence, Sarah Parker's shoes, sneakers with worn soles, squeaking slightly on the polished floor. When they entered the nurse's office, Emily looked up from where she sat carefully on the edge of a chair, padded with extra cushions. "Mommy!" Sarah rushed to her daughter, dropping to her knees to avoid jostling Emily with a hug. "Baby, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'm sorry, Mommy. I'm sorry. I tried not to tell, but it hurt so bad when I tried to sit on the swing, and Mrs. Bennet was so nice, and Nurse Rodriguez had to see, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Shh, it's okay, baby. It's okay." Sarah held her daughter's face in her hands, tears streaming down her own cheeks. "You didn't do anything wrong. Nothing at all." Mrs. Bennet watched the reunion, her heart aching. Whatever else was true, this was a mother who loved her child desperately. Sarah's hands were gentle as they touched Emily's face, checking her over, and her eyes held nothing but concern and devotion. "Miss Parker," Mrs. Bennet said gently, "we need to talk about what's been happening." Sarah's body tensed and she turned slowly to face the teacher. "I know what you're thinking, but I'm not hurting her. I would never hurt my baby. Never. I don't think you are, but Emily has significant injuries and she's been in pain all week. We need to understand the situation so we can help." "Help?" Sarah's laugh was bitter. "You mean you're going to call Child Protective Services and take my daughter away because I can't afford an apartment right now?" "Miss Parker, I know how this works. I grew up in the system. Foster home after foster home, nobody giving a damn if I lived or died as long as the checks kept coming. I promised myself when Emily was born that she would never, ever experience that. And I've kept that promise. Even when her father left, even when I lost my job, even when we lost everything. I've kept her safe, kept her fed, kept her clean. She goes to school every day. She does her homework. She's healthy. I'm doing everything right except for one thing. I don't have enough money for a roof over our heads, and for that, you're going to destroy our family." The words tumbled out in a rush, years of fear and struggle and determination packed into each sentence. Mrs. Bennet could see the exhaustion in every line of Sarah Parker's body, the toll that fighting for survival every single day had taken. "Miss Parker, please come with me to Principal Morrison's office. Emily can stay here with Nurse Rodriguez. I promise you we want to help, not hurt your family. But we need to have an honest conversation about what's happening." Sarah looked at her daughter, who nodded encouragingly despite her own tears. "It's okay, Mommy. Mrs. Bennet is nice. She kept her promise to me. She said she'd fight for us." Something in Sarah Parker's expression shifted at those words. She studied Mrs. Bennet more carefully, perhaps seeing past her own fear to recognize genuine compassion. Finally, she nodded. In Principal Morrison's office, Sarah sat in the chair offered to her, her posture defensive but her eyes defeated. Principal Morrison began with introductions, and when Linda Chen, the CPS caseworker, entered the room, Sarah's face went from pale to completely white. "Please," Sarah said immediately, "please don't take my baby. I know we're homeless. I know she's been sleeping on concrete. I know the conditions aren't good, but I'm working on it." I have a job interview next week at a warehouse. It pays $15 an hour, and if I get it, I'll have enough for a security deposit on an apartment within a month. Maybe 2 months. Just please give me a chance to fix this before you take her away. Linda Chen, a woman in her 50s who'd clearly seen every variation of family crisis imaginable, sat down and spoke in a calm, measured tone. Ms. Parker, I'm not here to take your daughter away. I'm here to assess the situation and see what resources we can connect you with. Tell me what's been happening. Sarah took a shaky breath and began to talk. The story spilled out. The grocery store closure, the job loss, the inability to find work that paid enough to cover rent and childcare, the eviction, the weeks of living in their car until it was repossessed, the desperate search for any shelter that would take them, only to find every program full with waiting lists months long. I found the abandoned building 3 weeks ago, Sarah explained. It's an old office building scheduled for demolition. The windows are mostly intact, so we're protected from weather. I found a side door with a broken lock. We have sleeping bags. I bought 2 good ones with my last paycheck, but the floor is concrete with broken tiles in places, and I know it's not good for Emily. I know it's hurting her. Her voice broke on the last words. Every morning I help her get ready in the gas station bathroom across the street. The manager knows us now. He looks the other way when we come in early to wash up. I make sure her uniform is clean. I make sure she eats breakfast, cereal bars and milk boxes. Not much, but something. I walk her to school. Then I spend the day looking for work, filling out applications, trying to figure out how to get us out of this nightmare. And every night I see the bruises getting worse, and I hate myself. I hate that I can't give her better. But I'm trying. God help me, I'm trying so hard. The room was silent except for Sarah's quiet crying. Even Principal Morrison, who prided herself on professional detachment, had tears in her eyes. Linda Chen leaned forward. Miss Parker, you're not a bad mother. You're a mother in an impossible situation, and I want you to know that. Emily is clean, well-fed, attending school regularly, and clearly loved. Those are not the signs of neglect. Those are the signs of a parent fighting with everything she has. Sarah looked up, surprise evident through her tears. You're not taking her? Not if I can help it. What I am going to do is connect you with emergency housing resources. We have a program specifically for families with children. It's temporary housing, usually rooms in converted motels, but they're clean and safe, and most importantly, they have beds. I can get you placed as early as tonight. I tried calling them 2 weeks ago. They said the waiting list was... CPS referrals move faster, Linda explained. It's not fair to other families on the list, but it's how the system works. A child with documented injuries from homelessness gets priority placement. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Tonight? We could sleep in a real bed tonight? I'll make the calls as soon as we finish here. Additionally, I'll connect you with TNF, temporary assistance for needy families. It's not much, but it'll help with food and immediate expenses. There's also a workforce development program that can help with job placement, and they have partnerships with employers who hire quickly. I don't understand, Sarah said, her voice bewildered. I thought CPS was supposed to be the enemy. I thought you took children away from poor families. Linda's expression turned sad. Sometimes we do, when children are in immediate danger. But our primary goal is always family preservation when possible. Poverty isn't a crime, Ms. Parker, though our society sometimes treats it that way. You love your daughter, you're caring for her to the best of your ability, and you need help, not punishment. Mrs. Bennet spoke up. Emily is an exceptional child, Miss Parker. She's smart, kind, and incredibly resilient. This week, she stood for 6 hours a day, every day, rather than let anyone discover your situation. She was trying to protect you. Sarah covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. She shouldn't have to protect me. I'm supposed to protect her. You have been protecting her, Mrs. Bennet insisted. You've been protecting her every way you know how, but now, please, let us help protect both of you. The meeting continued for another hour, Linda making phone calls, filling out forms, setting wheels in motion. By the time they finished, Sarah Parker had a voucher for emergency housing, good for 90 days, an appointment with social services the following Monday, contact information for food assistance programs, and a referral to free legal aid to help with the expunged eviction on her record that was making it hard to rent apartments. "Can I take Emily now?" Sarah asked when everything was finalized. "Can we go to this housing tonight?" "Absolutely," Linda said. "I'll give you the address and call ahead to let them know you're coming. They'll have a room ready." Sarah stood, then hesitated. "I don't know how to thank you all. I thought this day would be the worst day of my life. I thought I'd lose everything. But you're giving us a chance. You're giving us hope." "Thank you for being willing to accept help," Principal Morrison said. "It takes courage to let people in when you've been struggling alone." They retrieved Emily from the nurse's office. The girl looked anxious until she saw her mother's face, saw the tears of relief rather than despair, saw something she probably hadn't seen in months. Hope. "Are we in trouble, Mommy?" "No, baby. We're getting help. Real help. We're going to sleep in a bed tonight, a real bed with a mattress." Emily's eyes went wide. "Really? Tonight? Tonight?" The girl started crying again, but this time from relief and joy. Mrs. Bennet watched mother and daughter embrace, both of them finally able to release the fear and tension they'd carried for so long. Before they left, Mrs. Bennet knelt beside Emily. "You are one of the bravest people I've ever met. You stood all week, literally stood, because you were trying to protect your mom. That's extraordinary courage." "I just didn't want anyone to take me away from her," Emily said. "I know, sweetheart, and you know what? That's not going to happen. You two are going to stay together, and things are going to get better. It might take time, but they will get better." "Can I sit in class on Monday?" Emily asked, and the innocent question made all the adults laugh through their tears. "You can sit as much as you want, honey. In fact, I insist on it." Sarah shook hands with each person in the room, her gratitude evident in every word and gesture. As they walked toward the exit, Emily's hand clasped firmly in her mother's. Mrs. Bennet felt the weight she'd carried all week finally lift. Linda Chen lingered after they left. "You did good work here, Sarah. A lot of teachers would have just written the kid up for being disruptive and never looked deeper." I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I've been teaching long enough to know when behavior is a cry for help rather than defiance. "The system worked the way it's supposed to today," Linda said. "That doesn't always happen, but when it does, it's beautiful." After everyone left, Mrs. Bennet returned to her classroom to gather her things. The school was quiet, most staff and students long gone for the weekend. She sat at her desk and allowed herself to fully process everything that had happened. A week ago, Emily Parker had walked into her classroom, a frightened, hurting child carrying secrets too heavy for small shoulders. Today, that child had left with hope, with help, with a path forward. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Sarah Parker still needed to find steady employment, save money, secure permanent housing. Emily's injuries would take time to heal, both physical and emotional. But they weren't alone anymore. They had a support system, resources, people fighting for them. Mrs. Bennet thought about all the children sitting in classrooms across America right now, carrying their own secrets, fighting their own battles. How many were hungry? How many were homeless? How many were hurting in ways that teachers never saw because the children were too scared or too skilled at hiding it? Emily had been lucky. Her pain had become visible, forcing intervention. But how many others slipped through the cracks, suffering in silence? The thought was sobering, but it also renewed Mrs. Bennet's commitment to her work. Teaching wasn't just about math and reading and science. It was about seeing the whole child, noticing when something wasn't right, being willing to push past surface explanations to find deeper truths. Over the weekend, Mrs. Bennet couldn't stop thinking about Emily. She texted Linda Chen on Saturday to check in. "They're settling in well," Linda replied. "The housing facility manager says Emily spent an hour just lying on the bed, marveling at how soft it was. Sarah starts a temporary job on Monday. Office cleaning, evening shift. It's not ideal, but it's income. We're working on childcare arrangements." Monday morning, Mrs. Bennet arrived at school early, preparing her classroom. She'd brought in a special cushion for Emily's chair. Nothing too obvious, just extra padding that might help as the girl's injuries healed. She'd also prepared the class with a brief talk about kindness and not asking intrusive questions about people's personal lives. At 8:15, Emily walked into room 204. She wore the same uniform, but something fundamental had changed. Her shoulders weren't quite so hunched. Her eyes, while still showing evidence of hard times, held a spark that hadn't been there before, and most tellingly, she walked straight to her desk and sat down. A few students noticed and started to comment, but Mrs. Bennet's gentle look silenced them. Emily pulled out her notebook and looked up at her teacher with a small, genuine smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Bennet." "Good morning, Emily. How was your weekend?" "It was the best weekend I've had in a really long time. We slept in a bed. A real bed." The simple joy in those words made Mrs. Bennet's eyes water, but she blinked the tears back and smiled. "I'm so glad, sweetheart. So very glad." The day proceeded normally. Math lessons, reading groups, lunch, recess. Emily participated fully, and while she still showed signs of discomfort when sitting too long, she never once stood beside her desk in that defensive posture that had marked her first week. She played with Jessica at recess. She laughed during story time. She raised her hand to answer questions. She looked, for the first time since Mrs. Bennet had met her, like a 7-year-old child instead of a small soldier fighting a war. At dismissal, Sarah Parker appeared to walk Emily home. She pulled Mrs. Bennet aside briefly. "I got the job," Sarah said, her voice excited. "The warehouse position. They called this morning. $15 an hour, full-time, benefits after 90 days. I start Wednesday." "That's wonderful news." And Linda, the caseworker, she connected me with a program that provides work clothes and steel-toed boots. Everything I need. It's like doors are finally opening instead of slamming shut. "You deserve every bit of good fortune coming your way," Mrs. Bennet said sincerely. "You fought so hard for your daughter. Now let people fight for both of you." "I will, I promise." And Mrs. Bennet, thank you. Thank you for not giving up on Emily, for seeing past her behavior to what was really wrong. You saved us. Mrs. Bennet shook her head. "You saved yourselves by having the courage to accept help. I just opened a door. You're the ones walking through it." After they left, Mrs. Bennet stood in her classroom doorway, watching students stream past, each one carrying their own stories, their own struggles, their own triumphs. She couldn't save every child who walked through her door. She couldn't solve poverty or homelessness or all the systemic failures that created situations like Emily's. But she could pay attention. She could care. She could refuse to accept surface explanations when her instincts screamed that something deeper was wrong. She could be the kind of teacher who saw children as whole human beings rather than just students in seats. That evening, Mrs. Bennet received an email from Principal Morrison. The subject line read, "Community Response." She opened it to find that word of Emily's situation had spread. Not the details, which remained confidential, but the general story of a family in crisis receiving help. Local churches had donated furniture for when Sarah could move into permanent housing. A dental practice offered free care for Emily's overdue checkup. 3 employers had reached out offering Sarah job interviews. The PTA had created a fund to provide emergency assistance to families in the school district facing similar situations. One crisis had sparked a wave of compassion and action. Principal Morrison's email concluded, "You started something important here, Sarah. By refusing to look away, by insisting we dig deeper, you didn't just help one child. You reminded an entire community of their capacity for kindness. That's the true power of a teacher who cares." 3 months later, Mrs. Bennett stood in her classroom after school, arranging books in the reading corner. A knock on her door frame made her turn. Emily stood there with her mother, both of them smiling. Emily looked transformed, healthy, glowing, wearing new clothes that fit properly. The bruises were long-healed, and more importantly, the wariness in her eyes had been replaced by the natural openness of childhood. "We wanted to show you something," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. On the screen was a photo of a small but clean apartment, 2 bedrooms, simple furniture, sunlight streaming through windows. "We got our own place," Emily announced proudly. "It has a real kitchen and everything. And my bedroom has a bed with a purple bedspread and pillows, and it's so soft, Mrs. Bennett. So soft." Mrs. Bennett felt tears prick her eyes. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of both of you." "Mommy's job is going really good," Emily continued. "She's a supervisor now, and she got a raise. And we go to a food bank on Saturdays where they're really nice and don't make us feel bad. And I'm in an after-school program where we do art and homework, and I made 3 new friends." Sarah put her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We came to say thank you, properly, not just for helping us in that moment, but for seeing Emily, really seeing her. A lot of people looked at a kid who wouldn't sit and saw defiance or attention-seeking. You looked and saw a child in pain who needed help. That made all the difference." "You're both incredibly strong," Mrs. Bennett said. "You survived something that would have broken many people. You kept fighting, kept hoping, kept loving each other. That's what made the difference." Emily stepped forward and hugged Mrs. Bennett tightly. "I'm never going to forget that you helped us. Never." Mrs. Bennett held the child, thinking about that first day when Emily had walked into her classroom, scared, hurting, hiding so much pain. And now here she was, thriving, healing, becoming the child she was always meant to be. "You're going to do amazing things, Emily Parker," Mrs. Bennett whispered. "I just know it." As they left, Mrs. Bennett returned to her work, but her mind wandered to bigger questions. How many Emilys were out there right now? How many children were suffering in silence, too scared to ask for help, too busy trying to protect their families, to advocate for themselves? The answer was too many. Far too many. But today, one child was safe. One family was healing. One story had a happy ending. And sometimes, Mrs. Bennett thought, that had to be enough. You couldn't save everyone, but you could save someone. And maybe, if enough people paid attention, if enough people cared, if enough people refused to look away when something didn't feel right, maybe those individual someones would add up to something bigger, something transformative. She thought about Emily's smile as she talked about her purple bedspread, about the simple joy of a child who no longer had to sleep on concrete, who no longer had to hide her pain, who no longer had to stand all day because sitting hurt too much. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. If you've been moved by Emily's story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that kindness matters, that paying attention matters, that one person caring enough to look deeper can change everything. Drop a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own experiences with helping someone in need. Together, we can create a community that refuses to look away from those who are suffering. Thank you for watching, and remember, you never know what battles someone is fighting. Choose kindness. Always choose kindness.